You often talk about, as a libertarian, how the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are really two sides of the same coin, and they agree on most fundamental issues, but have some disagreement on these wedge issues like abortion or guns. I kind of see the same thing happening with the Libertarian Party and the Green Party, insofar as there's agreement on ending wars, on ending domestic spying, ending the drug war, ending mass incarceration, ending corporatism. Part of the
Sure.
Green Party platform is also having to do with decentralization. So they're not really, big government left. They're part of what I would call the libertarian left in the tradition of Ralph Nader, Noam Chomsky. So I would just be interested in your take on the Green Party, on the libertarian left. When you look at these folks who, may skew a little bit more towards collectivist economics, but also there's
Mhm.
such fundamental agreement on these other issues. Do you think that there is room for partnership between the libertarian right and the libertarian left?
I do think there's a lot of places where the green agenda or a kind of left agenda and a libertarian agenda overlap. And that's where, that's what politics is for. It's not ultimately about agreeing on everything and then going out into the world, like, leaving the clubhouse and then going out into the world with a unanimous consent decree to do this, that, and the other thing. It's finding people where you can who agree with you on particular issues and getting things done. That's what happened with criminal justice reform, which was actually, the real energy behind that in a lot of ways was a series of very principled small government conservatives who, many with evangelical or Christian affiliations, pushing for criminal justice reform for a variety of reasons, and then meeting up with people in the civil rights community and people, police, groups like Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, LEAP, and whatnot, who are, a hodgepodge of right wingers and left wingers, but they're all former cops who recognize the drug war is bad and the drug war, fuels kind of a carceral state and all of that kind of stuff. So there's many, many places, and you outlined many of them between Greens and Libertarians. The fundamental difference, though, and it is a big difference, is that I think the Green Party in general is ultimately wedded to a vision of economic control and centralization by the state, where certain things are simply not allowed, where there's a lot of regulation and control of what individuals can do, what businesses can do, et cetera. And that's always that's a gulf. That's not going to go away, but we can get there down the road, particularly when we're talking about actual politics and policy. A few years ago, Ralph Nader came out with a book, and he's worked with people like Grover Norquist of Americans for Tax Reform on various pieces of legislation, and of course Nader, back in the day in the 70s, he, along with Ted Kennedy and Jimmy Carter, were the architects of a vast deregulation, both of airline ticket prices, but also interstate trucking and a bunch of other things, because they felt it would help consumers, which it did help. But Nader had a book about where kind of basically progressives and libertarians and certain types of conservatives all overlap. And if we would stop talking about first principles, we could actually get some policy changes and some new legislation. I interviewed him about that, and it was funny. Within 2 minutes, I was like, "Yeah, but Ralph, like you want a big government, blah blah blah." And he was like, "Nick, you're doing it wrong. You're playing into the larger game, which is to keep people who agree on this particular topic in front of us. This piece of legislation, which would be good for everybody, we're not going to get to have that conversation or pass that law because we're too busy fighting over first principles." So, this is part of the politics of the 21st century, is that you're not going to see, I think, and Matt Welch and I talked about this in our 2011-2012 book, The Declaration of Independence. You're not going to see long-lasting political coalitions that last for decades or generations, as much as you're going to see ad hoc groups where people say, "Look, we agree on criminal justice reform. We agree on immigration, certain aspects of immigration reform. We agree on guns. We agree on this. We agree on that." And you come together for that moment. You get the work done, and then that coalition kind of disappears. And then some of the same people might kind of congeal around another set of topics or issues. So that, I think, is interesting. And one of the things that we need to do, I think, across the political spectrum, is kind of start coming up with a language that allows for those kinds of coalitions to be built more quickly and more effectively, recognizing that they're also going to disappear after the work is done.
So it wouldn't be realistic to envision a world where Jesse Ventura, for example, would be the Libertarian and the Green Party nominee.
Probably not. And it's also partly because these are small parties which covet their uniqueness and in some way their marginal roles and their place as as educational outlets rather than serious political parties. And you say somebody like Jesse Ventura in particular, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I think, he was a pretty successful governor of Minnesota, of a serious state and everything. He's kind of gone off the bend. So it's also like when you start to think of who would be the person who might knit these two parties together, it's not going to be Ventura. I think he's unacceptable because he's a conspiracy nut in a lot of ways, and he strays. Even when he restrains himself, he's always straining in that direction. And I don't think he would be acceptable to libertarians. I don't know about Green Party people at this point.